What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Wise Guys Hideaway, man. Let me tell you something. I've been out there just fucking slaving away at my new job, climbing cell phone towers and, getting everything all swapped up for the 5G and making sure that these little devices in our hand that keep us from, being intimate or civil with one another, got to make sure they keep working. So, this particular episode of Wise Guys Hideaway is brought to you in part by my main employer, Augusta Tower Technologies, out in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Shouts out to the boys. It's also brought to you in part by Our Thing Clothing Apparel, which is a Detroit-made clothing brand from ex-Detroit, hustler and mob enforcer Gunnar Lindblom, who became an author during a stint in the penitentiary, and after he got out and released his books, To Be a King, Volume 1 and 2, you see it there in the background, he started up a clothing label, Our Thing Clothing Apparel, and this podcast is an endorser, supporter, and partner of that. Another shout out I gotta give is to my boy Scott M. Bernstein, probably the one of the smartest mob historians that I'm privy to talk to. He wrote that little brown book right there in the back, the Motor City Mafia. He's also the proprietor of the Original Gangster podcast, and a real mentor to me, man. I'm always fucking bothering that guy and hopping on and just trying to pick his brain. So I appreciate him taking the time out. Another shout I gotta give is my boy Boston Rob. My partner in crime and all this. He's he's my editor. He's my behind the scenes guy. I'm gonna get him on here eventually. I'm gonna get him on. I want to hear that. That I saw it. That Boston accent. We gotta get him on here. But yeah, for right now, he just holds things down on on the other end. I helping me edit shit and get shit in focus, sending me info, and so I really appreciate you, Rob. Shout out to my boy David Brexpire across the pond. I'm gonna send this one to you personally. Big shout out to Larry Mazza, the author of The Life, which is a true to blue tale of just the grit and grime of mob life, during the heyday, really during the Colombo Wars. Another shout out I got to give is to an individual I hope will soon join me on the podcast, and that is Frank D'Amato, who is the author of The Carmine the Snake. A true story, true crime story, as well as he's got a new book out about Albert the Mad Hatter, or the Lord High Executioner Anastasia. So, and he's also, he's as real as they come too, man. He grew up around this shit. So big shout out to all those guys. You know what I mean? Like David Randazzo, Ronnie Roach. David Randazzo, appreciate you the other night at the Baymount, dog. Appreciate that. So we're gonna get into it here, everybody. Welcome to episode 21, and the first one we're broadcasting on YouTube. So let's get after it. All right, so now I'm sure most people have seen the movie Casino, but if you haven't, you've either been living under a rock, you don't like mob movies. It is a really, really long movie. But Robert De Niro, Sharon Stone, Joe Pesci, Martin Scorsese's director. You got good old James Woods playing a coked out scumbag, and Don Rickles, playing a hotel man or casino manager and shit. It's a pretty epic tale, and the one we're gonna be focusing on here, or the two we're gonna be focusing on really, would be Tony Spilotro, aka Nicky Santorum, which is Joe Pesci's character, which is a really good fit, actually. The scene where he's walking out of the courthouse and he's got that gray streak through his hair, he's in that brown suit, is, man, he looks a lot like him. And then the other one would be Sam Ace Rothstein, which is, in real life, Frank Lefty Rosenthal. Now, we're primarily going to focus on the Spilotros, or, Tony Spilotro, as well as his brother, Michael Spilotro, because it was on this day in 1986 that they would, quote unquote, go missing, Which everybody knows, when you go missing in the mob, she gone. You gone. You're just gone. You either done run off and join the witness protection program, or, you in a trunk somewhere, or you fucking in a shallow grave. But Anthony John Spilotro was born, May 19th, 1938. And, as I just said, he disappeared on this day in 1986, and would shortly be discovered on the 22nd in this month in 1986, buried in a shallow grave along with his brother. They had both been stripped down to their underwear, and they were almost unrecognizable. They had been pummeled to death, and we're going to tell you how that all came to be. Now, Tony was a stout little fella. He was 5'5", but he had the heart of a lion. But his nickname was always, Tony the Ant, But he did not care for that. He did that's not something somebody would say around him. That was one of those like, oh, there goes the Ant, and oh, hey, how you doing, Anthony? Good to see like I don't know why the Chicago guys are talking like they're from Brooklyn, but that's just how I get the Chicago. I don't know, but he was 48 when he died, and I mean he had a hell of a run, you guys. I mean he left behind a wife Nancy and a son. Uh, which I do believe was Anthony Jr. I'm not completely sure on that, but I mean, along with being killed with his brother, I mean, Tony Spilotro really sank a big chunk of the Chicago Outfit's sort of bread and butter. I mean, he didn't really sink it because the way the skim got found out anyway was on a wiretap from a Kansas City underboss where they were discussing the murder of the Irishman Danny Green by Ray Ferrito, and the feds picked that up, and then they worked into the skim, and then the Kansas City underboss, I can't remember his name to save my life. Been climbing cell phone towers 14 hours a day all week, so I'm a little burnt up and pretty stupid at this point, but nonetheless. He did what no mobster should ever do, and he kept records of all that shit from all his trips to Vegas. So that half sank them, and then Spilatro's wild, brandish, larger than life attitude would not help their cause either. Now, a little fun fact about Tony's brother Michael was he actually starred in an episode of Magnum P.I. I don't know if he starred in more than one, but I know for a fact he starred in one episode of Magnum P.I. So he kind of had that Hollywood glitz and glam about him. Unfortunately, that $1 million smile would eventually be knocked out at the hands of several ruthless mobsters. But nonetheless, get back to Tony. Now, Tony was born the fourth out of 6 children, right? And he was born to two hardworking immigrant parents. His father, Pasquale Patsy Spilatro Sr., and then his mother Antoinette Spilatro. Now, his father had immigrated here in 1914. He worked his way, into the Midwest into Illinois and settled in Chicago, and opened up a family restaurant. That's what I mean. That was his dream. That's the American dream. You know what I mean? You come from some run down, more poverty stricken village in Sicily, and you make it to America, and you grit, you grind through, wherever you gotta grind through. And then eventually you got your own little family business. No one can tell you what to do. You're your own boss. You know your kids will always have a job. But that's not quite how it played out for old Patsy, because along with just the allure of the streets during this time period, for any young man that, had any potential to join a gang or organized crime crew or whatever you want to call it, his restaurant was privied by, infamous, notorious Chicago mobsters like Sam Giancana, Momo they called him, or Frank the Enforcer Nitti. I mean, Joe Batter. I mean, you name it. And so very early on, Tony and 4 of his brothers, so 5 out of 6 of the kids, they hit the streets, and they hit it with a vengeance. I mean, they start, robbing cart vendors, doing, small change holdups, robbing purses, all that shit that, later on in their life, mobsters will claim, like, never me. Like, when you were 13, 14, you were fucking swiping wallets and, fucking breaking open parking meters and shit like that. Don't get, don't get like that. We've all been there. Everybody's been a nickel and dime crook, and if you haven't, then I don't know why you're listening to me, Jesus. So, during this time period when, you're on the streets and you're trying to build a name for yourself, Tony meets another aspiring young hood by the name of Frank Collada. Now, Frank Collada is played by Frank Vincent in the movie, and they kept his name the same, just Frankie, It was one of my favorite parts when they're beating him with bats in the corner. He's like, Frankie, you piece of shit. Like, no, it's so funny. Oh, man. But, yeah, so Collada and Spilatro meet, and they begin, sort of running hustles together, trying to, break up dice games, or, they're getting in fights, trying, hijacking cigarette trucks, just like, that low rank, mid-level type stuff. And now eventually the two of them will both work under one of the most notorious mob enforcers I've ever researched, and that's Samuel Mad Sam, Jesus, DeStefano. And, this guy he was one sick pup, man. He was a rapist. He was, can't shake a stick at the amount of people fucking Mad Sam killed. And it was just a very futile mentor, if you will, because he took the already, budding young psychopath that was Spilotro, and then the more sociopathic thief and narcissist that was Collada. And I mean, he just fucking molded them into two pretty, you know, prime, prime gangsters, really, at very young ages. I mean, he he would have Tony, hit a guy with a blowtorch while he's beating him with a wrench. Tony's fucking 16, 17, something like that, and Mad Sam is just I'll burn him more, burn him more. Like Mad Sam was crazy. He'll definitely get his own episode. I'm not a fan of him because anybody who's a rapist is not respectable in my book. Most definitely, that's I mean, I can give the tip of the cap to a lot of crime, but that definitely ain't one of them. So, but he still earned his own fucking podcast. I don't like most of these guys. I mean, they're fascinating to me. But yeah, they're definitely they're good fellas, but they're not nice fellas. You know what I mean? So that's eventually how Spilotro will get his claim to fame, and he'll really get his start in the outfit, in the Chicago outfit. Is that eventually when Mad Sam was being Mad Sam and bringing way too much attention down on himself. I mean, he's yelling at, media coverage people, talking about this, that, and whatever. I'm pretty sure he either did or attempted to kill one of his own brothers. And I mean, it was just, he had to go. So the powers that be, they bring in Spilotro. And they tell this is your chance, kid. And I mean, Spilotro can't be but 19, 20 at the time. And he goes to Mad Sam's house and he, pumps 5 bullets into him in his own garage and leaves him where he found them. His student becomes a teacher, and the teacher, becomes fertilizer. I guess. I don't really know what else the old boy would become. Now, after that, Spilotro, he's in like Flint. You know what I mean? He starts to get buddy to some of the higher echelon members, and it's during this time period that he also encounters what will be the brains of the organization in Vegas for all these guys, and that's Frank Lefty Rosenthal, aka Sam Ace Rothstein, Robert De Niro's character, who actually, when he was asked to disclose any of the personal information he wouldn't mind sharing, Lefty Rosenthal said he didn't want to be a part of the picture at all. He hung up and he's like, no, thank you. And then he had heard wind that Robert De Niro would be portraying him in the movie, and instantly changed his tune. Frank Collada would actually help with the movie too, because eventually Frank Collada, these guys go out to Vegas, right? It's 1971, and Rosenthal has been out in Vegas for a few years, and I mean, he was out there just primarily professionally gambling. Now, like when Rosenthal came from Chicago, in Chicago, what he would do for the bosses is, he was the type of guy, he could find those 11-1 odd games and get you that 11. He just knew it. He knew if somebody on the team was injured, but the injury was more severe or less severe. He knew if a guy was unfocused because his girlfriend just broke up with him. He knew the type of bounce you got off of different woods at the college basketball courts. Dope horses, crooked referees, whatever it was that could clear a big number. Rosenthal did it, and he did it very well, and that's where the help of Spilotro would be enlisted, not only in Chicago, sort of watching his back from all the, nickel and dime hoods that are going to try to rip him off, because Rosenthal was Jewish. He wasn't Italian, but he was definitely protected by the, Arcado's army, I'll call it, which trickled down into just a slew of very dangerous individuals, and Spilotro being probably the most dangerous during his time, during his heyday. Yeah, I would definitely say that was one of the top Chicago enforcers, without a doubt. And so they sort of put him in charge of just keeping an eye on Rosenthal, and eventually they ship him out to Vegas, and then eventually they weave him into running a casino for them that they skim millions of dollars a month off the top. Everybody that's put into the count room where all the money's piled up and counted through, they're all the Elfits guys. So yeah, they was making some serious money. But Rosenthal ran the casino like a tight ship. Once the money got to the count room, he no longer, above his pay grade. That's the powers that be. Out on the floor, though, people didn't cheat in Rosenthal's casinos. People didn't, you didn't fuck around there. The only one who would fuck around there was Spilatro when he finally came out in 1971. And when he came out in 1971, at first he was all good. He set up a few rackets here and there, mainly shaking down like pimps and drug dealers and stuff. 'Cause, I mean, they didn't have nobody to run to, so he shows up and he's like, yeah, I'm Tony Spilatro from Chicago. Like, time to pay the piper, 20% every week, putting you out of business. But eventually he starts getting wild in the casinos and just, he hires a crew of cowboys pretty much. He's got a couple of his guys from back home, but then he starts taking like just local yokels and like busting up high stakes poker games and fucking, trying to cheat at blackjack and trying to rig slots. And it's like, you can't even go next door to do it. You're doing it like in your boys' casino, in your people's casino. Come on now, man. And eventually, I mean, it gets them put in the black book. And I mean, just like if you've seen Casino, using like he says, like there's only two names in that book, and one of them's still Al Capone. Like, I mean, there's not that many people in it, in the grand scheme of things. But if you do end up in that little black book, there's two names that are still in there. Anthony Spilatro and Al Capone. So I mean, you've definitely made it as far as like if you're a card shark or a hustler or a cheat, and they put you in that little book after they give you a fucking beating. Yeah, you get to kind of chuckle to yourself, but don't go back in the casino fucking around. They'll bury you out in the desert, So after that happens, I mean, it's not like you can report back to the bosses and be like, hey, I can't shake down poker games and any of that anymore. So like, we're good, right? I just got to watch, Rosenthal, and then I don't got to send nothing back home. No, they sent a hit squad out there right then. So Spilatro did the only thing he knew how to do. He put together a few guys, one of them being, Frank Collada. He, flies him out, and around, 19, or I want to say like 1979, he flies out Collada, and they sort of just start this renegade cowboy crew of robbers known as the Hole in the Wall Gang. I mean, actually, the device is pretty brilliant, but I mean, they were just all so fucking wild that like it was never gonna last forever. What they would do is, like a jewelry store, like an electronics, store, an art depot or something. They'd pull a panel truck along the side, and they'd have the whole trap door bit that slide out of the side of the panel truck. They'd put up insulation, and they'd take a big old just start screwing, just a big old rivet gun, just start screwing, and put enough holes in it to where when they take like a mini sledgehammer, put the insulation against it, whack, 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 brick by brick, and then you go right into the side, bypass the alarms, and I mean, they made a killing doing it. They also started, moving cocaine, which they also started snorting cocaine. I mean, one tends to go with the other. It seems anyway, in my experience and in every case I've ever read and anyone I've ever talked to. But along with that, they started robbing high rollers, which would be like, let's say you got a valet. This kid works valet at the Flamingo or the whatever. The Stardust is actually the casino that they were overseeing. So you got this 19-year-old kid, and he likes to gamble, he likes to party, he likes women. So he takes a loan off you, Tony Spilatro. He thinks you and him are buddies, but now all of a sudden he owes you money, and it's been 2 weeks, and he sees that you two are not fucking buddies, and you are dead serious that you will break both his legs with a bat in front of everybody. So you tell him, you know what, kid, don't worry about the 5,000. You just let me know when, fill in the blank, such and such. You sort of do a little recon and figure out who the high rollers are in town. You can tell they rent out the top floor suites, and the girls they're with got big old long mink furs. Their Cadillacs got gold everything on it, and I mean, some of them not even gangsters. Some of them just like really successful businessmen, Wall Street guys. People who just like to live flashy and have managed to make it. And when the valet takes his car and the gentleman and his lady go inside, he'd ring back to Spilatro, let them know that you're all clear, and they'd go to the penthouse suite and then rob them blind, man. Because people like that, like, yeah, they might be decked out in jewelry, and all that jewelry you're seeing, man, that's one set. That's jewelry for that outfit. You know what I mean? So, and then loose cash. I mean, it's the 80s and shit. Fuck. I mean, plastic wasn't that big of a thing yet. So, I mean, and that goes on for, quite a while. And like they really just couldn't stop robbing and stealing and killing. There were so many, different like shoot 'em up moments where like guys would just get, coked out of their minds and just go start blasting. There was one instance where a member of the Hole in the Wall gang was, wrongfully shot by police. He was holding a hero sandwich, and they bust a few in him. And I mean, and then they, plant a gun on him. Like things just like we're seeing in today's day and age. The police are just always, fucking out for themselves and fucking they stick together. They're the biggest gang there is, real talk, which I won't get into my opinions on any of that. All I will say is if you're going to protest, do it peacefully. If you're going to riot, light the right buildings on fire. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all, man. Why are you going to burn down, your buddy's dad's, meat market or liquor store? Light up the Walmart, fuck it, light up the courthouse, as a matter of fact. Actually, do me a real favor. Hit that JP Morgan Federal Chase Bank and let my fucking credit go to just nothing. Do me a solid for your boy over here at Wise Guys Hideaway, all right? Stop, burn down the right stuff. That's all I'm saying. Quit fucking up cars that aren't cop cars. I'm all about anarchy. You guys see the drop bag with, the Gonzo fist and the, American flag with the anarchy through it. But you got to kind of, at least pick a lane. You can't just, and don't try to stop me in the freeway because, I wouldn't play that shit. Like I said, I'm all about the protest, but don't try to get, I'm doing 70, man. I'm doing 70 and nothing about everybody crowding there makes me want to stop. So that's my 2 cents on it. Like I said, fuck the police, as NWA put it best. It's a hard job, but fucking figure it out. I got a hard job too. And, we figure it out every day. You think fucking having to send everything up a rope 300 feet and pull it off is easy so you can have your stupid cell phones? It's not, but we handle it. So cops, figure it out. People either either shit or get off the pot. Either, quit half-assing it. Just, get it together. I love y'all, but come on, man. And what happened to Corona? By the way, is that still a thing? We still doing that? Anyway, so the robbing and the thieving goes on for a while, and like I said, they're cowboys out there. And Spilotro takes it even further. Not only is he's getting more and more addicted to coke, he's robbing everything in sight. He's having people killed without permission. One of which he actually blamed Frank Collada for. And eventually, when Frank Collada would be jailed after a robbery on July 4th, 1981, which was the Bertha's Gifts and Home Furnishings on East Sahara Avenue in Las Vegas. They had the slew of them, guys. They had Frank Collada, they had Joe Blasco, Leo Garadio, Ernest Davino, Larry Newman, and then Wayne Matsky. And by 1982, Collada's he's in prison. He catches the burglary charge, and he's doing a stretch. And they actually play back to him a tape of Spilotro, pretty much blatantly blaming him for all the things that are going wrong. They're like, oh, he's half-cocked, he's killing people off orders, and all these things that Collada's doing, he really is doing on orders from Spilotro. These are Spilotro's calls. You know what I mean? And so eventually in 1982, around July, Collada's like, well, I'm going to flip. Fuck it, I'm going to flip because, Spilotro's going down, he's going down hard because the worst thing of all that he's doing is he started sticking it to, Lefty Rosenthal's wife, Jerry McGee, who was, a working girl. She was a hustler in Vegas, and Rosenthal's only weakness. He actually was once quoted as saying, that was the only thing I couldn't control. There's the only spread I couldn't cover is I could never make her love me. And, she was a wild card. Now, September 1983, after Collada, begins to debrief his crimes. He debriefed over 300 fucking crimes. Tony Spilotro was indicted on conspiracy in the Sherwin Jerry Leisner murder, which was the murder of a real estate developer that had been passed down from the powers that be. He, manages to bail out at $100,000 bond, and never manages to see anything from that one. But this is the bad time. This is where the spiral starts coming down. He's in court for this, that. Collada's, telling everything they've done since they've been out there, and even some of the things they did back home as kids. One of them, so ruthless that Scorsese wrote it in to make it seem like it had happened in Vegas. The scene in Casino where he crushes his head in the vice was actually called the M&M murders. And it was the murders of Irish gangster William McCarthy and, just another run-of-the-mill street thug, James Miraglia, who were found on May 14th, 1962, just beaten, tortured. Like I said, McCarthy's head had been crushed. like crushed, like looked like, and what had happened was there had been an incident, a local business that was run by, the individuals that Spilotro worked for, was shot up by these cowboys, McCarthy and Miraglia, and a few people, ended up getting hurt. I think a couple got killed. And so Spilotro, being the young tough enforcer, he's I don't know if he's clipped Mad Sam yet, but I want to say it's shortly after that. Then he's still proving that tough guy name. And yeah, so the powers that be, they sick him on him. They managed to get McCarthy first, and Frank Collada and just Tony Spilotro tortured this guy for 2 days. I mean, it's really not funny, but it is kind of funny because fuck him, he's a scumbag too. So just trash, taking out the trash, not a big deal. And this guy won't break. It's like in the movie, they said they put ice picks in his balls. They, Frank Collada's confirmed that. I mean, he's a turncoat, so I mean, you take, with a grain of salt. But I mean, I could see it. The Irish, man, we don't budge. It takes a lot for us to budge. And what it took for this guy was for his head to be squished in a vice grip. And he gives up his boy, James Miraglia, who is subsequently, found, hunted down like a dog. And that's all she freaking wrote. Now, Spilotro also had a really, really good hand with his attorney, who would eventually be the future mayor of Las Vegas, Oscar Goodman. And I mean, Oscar was the man, dude. He just kept Tony calm, collective, and looking like as much of a civilian as Tony Spilotro could look. Because it's like he says in the movie, like Nicky loved being a gangster. He didn't care who knew it. That's the truth. Tony Spilotro loved being a gangster. He did. He relished in it. It really, it definitely fueled his engine, And now, eventually, this all just starts to unwind. This is a big, big ball of pressure that it's gonna explode eventually, and Spilotro's gonna definitely be at one of the forefronts of it. And so, after the whole Kansas City wire tap bit, and the fact that during the investigation of Danny Green's murder, they subsequently find, how to prove that the skim is going on. And that's from the records kept by the Casey underboss. And after that, I mean, everybody's catching indictments, Rico, I mean, for real. And so not too long into this whole ordeal, they all meet at the Sheck Lounge in North Riverside in Illinois. When I say they, I mean, the top echelon guys, Joe Batters, James Marcello, individuals like that. And they begin going through the list. Everybody involved in the skim, who's got to go, who don't got to go, Rosenthal actually wasn't on the hit list. Spilotro had renegade status, has always taken that into his own, sort of like planning, because the bosses back home not only they didn't even suspect, they fucking knew that he was sticking it to Jerry McGee, because she couldn't keep her mouth shut about it, for real. I mean, she blatantly told Rosenthal, and everybody who would listen in that square block anyway. So so once they get to Tony Spilotro, it's like, he was mentored by Mad Sam, and he just, became a terrible Tony. So fuck him, he's gotta go. And on that rationale, because Michael had been brought out to Vegas too, with Tony to help out, and, was getting just as involved with Tony, Michael had to go as well, so that there'd be no revenge. I mean, we don't need no more bullshit from the Spilotros. You know what I'm talking about? So they say, clip them both. The way they lured him was because when the indictments came in and the guys just started to fall out in Vegas, the Spilotros, they were gone. They hightailed it. So we're back in Chicago, where we're in Oak Park, and which is where Michael lives. And it's June 14th, 1986, just like it is today, except, it's 1986. So, and the boys are suited up, they got really, fancy suits on, because what's supposed to happen is they're supposed to go to a meet point, hop in with some other wise guys, go to another meet point. Tony's supposed to be made a captain. Michael's supposed to get his butt and become a made man. So, and you get the call, you got to go. I mean, they were half suspicious this was going to be the last ride they ever took anyway, because they left all their jewelry and cash and, anything that, why would you want to get buried with you? She can sell it, whatever. And they told their wives, if we don't come home tonight, forget about us, we're gone. They then drove to O'Hare International Airport, where they met up with another car, another individual that drove them to a house. Now, it wouldn't be uncommon for a ceremony such as that to be in like an abandoned warehouse, the back of a closed restaurant, a house. So, I mean, these guys are used to going shifty places, but I'm sure that gut feeling was getting real bubbly. They walk into the house, and they're standing in the living room. Tony says, "Where is everybody?" He says, "Oh no, we're downstairs. Just right on down there. Just go down there." Tony goes down the stairs, and unlike in the movie where they beat him to death in the cornfield with baseball bats, that's not how it went down. They they go down in the basement. Tony goes to put his hand out. How you doing? And when he shakes, the guy's hand, he notices that everybody besides him and Michael have on doctor's gloves, and that there's plastic on the floor probably. And so he says, "Well, I got time for a prayer." And then Tony's, beaten to a submission to where like he'll no longer be able to fight back, and forced to watch his little brother Michael beat to within an inch of his life with fist, not bats, with fist. It's actually speculated whether or not they were actually just beaten to death and then just buried like fucking normal, or whether they were really beat to within an inch of their life. But it sounded good, so Scorsese put it in the movie, and then anybody who eventually got caught up and indicted, and it was like, yeah, we beat them to until they was almost not breathing, and then buried them while they was breathing. Like, why not? Scorsese set you up for a better ending than if you did it normally. I've never beat somebody to death and then buried them, but just them breathing seems like a liability. So I don't know, whatever. But nonetheless, they're they're beaten with fists, kick, punch, whatever. Like I said, maybe a chunk of mortar or something that's broke off in the basement or what have you, and then they're driven out. About an hour, 45 minutes outside of Illinois in that little stretch of Indiana between Illinois and Michigan. And they're buried in a shallow grave in a cornfield. And they aren't found until the 22nd. And, when they're found, they're beat so bad they have to go to the dental records. And, the murder goes unsolved for years. Nobody really cried that Spilotro was gone. He was a sick pup. Scorsese gets a hold of the whole ordeal. Pileggi writes the book. And, it's a blockbuster. And so once something becomes that Hollywood and like that, that's a really graphic scene, and Joe Pesci, fun fact, Joe Pesci actually got dinged with a bat filming that scene, for real, actually. So it's definitely a graphic scene. It's, Scorsese has the last scene that he'll ever do of direct violence. And actually he hasn't broke on that. Anything after that's been sort of like a choppy image of violence, Gangs of New York. You see the start of a stabbing, and then you just see the finished result. You don't see the entire motion. Whereas in Casino, they show them getting dinged up pretty good. So, but yeah, it's so they're buried out there, and once they're found, they're dug up. And so the movie sort of puts their names back in all the feds' heads, investigators, and all that. And nothing ever really comes of it until eventually on April 25th, 2005. When the 14 higher echelon ranking guys of the Chicago outfit, there's not 14 high echelon, but captains into the boss, James Marcello, and the other boss, and all. And it was come to find that most of them had participated in the murder of the Spilotro brothers on orders from boss at that time, Tony Arcado, aka Joe Batters. So it's kind of really on Scorsese why the Spilotros would ever even be remembered. Those guys probably still would have got indicted, still would have went down, but the push towards trying to solve who killed the Spilotro brothers, just because Scorsese put it on a big screen in a big graphic fucking way, was it was definitely had to have been a son of a bitch for all the guys involved. I wonder if they watched it in the movie. When they watched the movie, it was like, oh, that's not going to be good for us. I don't know. But I got to get to packing, you guys. I got another week on the road, more towers to climb, more sights to see, more clouds to try to touch, man. But you got, like I said, man, everybody just relax out there. It's good. We're going to make it. We made it through worse. It's what, been 100 years since a good pandemic, been 100 years since we really let loose. I guess not really. We riot every 10 years, but we riot when sports teams win too. So, but nonetheless, whether you black, whether you white, whether you're Latino, whether you're, we're all American, baby. We're all American, and I love you no matter what you are. So, from all of us here at Wise Guys Hideaway, you guys stay safe out there. I'm out.